an economist with Edelweiss Research, and I'm delighted to present to you the fourth episode in the series, The Calm Allocators. Today, we take a deep dive into the pool of equity valuation while bringing to you a very specific perspective. How do the valuations change in ZIRP, which is the zero interest rate policy regime? Just as a context, US adopted ZIRP in March 2020 as a response to the COVID pandemic, and it looks like it's going to be the way forward for some time now for almost all advanced economies. As we move on this very interesting path of understanding valuation code, we are joined by Mr. Vinay Khattar, who will help us identify the right concoction of growth, return, and cost of money to create wealth. Vinay began his career with Edelweiss almost a decade ago, and he's been instrumental in forming the Edelweiss investment research team. He has a very strong stock selection philosophy, which is anchored around companies with strong moats, large addressable markets, and capital efficiency. He's currently the head of research for Edelweiss Professional Investor Research Desk. And in all my personal interactions with him, he's always urged me to think on the second or rather a third level. So Vinay, a very warm welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
So Vinay, as much as I understand valuations, it's part art and part science. And when it comes to accounting numbers, they are largely just the tip of the icebergs. So help us understand, how do you value stocks for your own investments?
Once you start getting into markets, you realize that there are so many factors which influence stock prices and stock valuations that this field becomes so huge to study. This is the only place in the world where a stock with 50 rupees could be far more expensive than a stock worth 500 rupees. So what drives these numbers? There are sectors like consumption where a price to earning multiple of 50 times is cheap, and another sector like steel or cement where a price to earning multiple of 10 times could also be very expensive. So how do you value stocks and sectors? So there are many methods: price to earning multiples, price to book, discounted cash flow, many frameworks that exist. The factors that drive them could be the cycles within the sector, the capital efficiency of the businesses within the sector, and so on. So if we were to broadly basket few factors which influence the most in terms of valuation, they could be clubbed in three broad baskets, which is your growth factors, your return on capital, and the discounting factor. But the interesting part is that all the three baskets are hugely influenced by what plays out on the interest rate side. So as Warren Buffett says, that interest rates are like gravitational pull of the world of finance, all powerful and all prevailing.
All right, Vinay, so as you said, interest rates are all powerful and all prevailing. And as we speak today, interest rates are headed southwards for all emerging economies, and advanced economies are largely in the zero interest rate policy regime now. In that context, how do you see the whole equity valuation picture changing in the coming decade or so?
So to take a look forward, let's take a look back. Now in the last few years, the interest rate regime across the world has been on a downward trajectory. Currently, there are 45 countries in the world which have interest rates which are less than 1%, basically between 0 to 1%. That's an incredible large part of global economic system which is at such low interest level and for a prolonged period of time. Such interest levels are having an impact on the global economy in many, many ways, including impacting all asset classes. That very much includes equity. Now, we did a study of last few decades of the US market, and we found a very interesting phenomena. We found out in about 7 instances when the rates were cut by more than 2%, the equity valuations went up by almost 1/3 as compared to their historical levels, even adjusted for high growth that the companies reported. Now, that presented a very interesting phase where you find that a cut in interest rate causes equity valuations to jump over and above in a very meaningful manner what the growth rate of the companies are.
So as you mentioned, 45 countries are below 1%. Some other 93 countries are below 4%, which is where India is today. So obviously this is an unprecedented kind of interest rate regime that we are in. But what I gather from our conversation is that when interest rate falls, the valuation increases in the sense that the whole PE band shifts upward. Does that mean the same company will now command a higher valuation ceteris paribus? And if so, can you please elaborate on the internal dynamics that play out for this metamorphosis?
That's absolutely correct, Ankita. So if you take a look at the entire spectrum of what plays out in the real economy and in the markets, you'll find two very distinct phenomena playing out. Because cost of capital is a very important cost from the business point of view. So as that cost of capital drops, the business efficiency goes up, which means you are able to produce the same goods, whether that is car or mobile phones, at cheaper costs, which means the demand for that will go up. Secondly, the demand goes up for another reason, which is because the cost of funds is coming down, and if you were to buy a car on a loan, the cost of that loan comes down for buying a car or a television, which means the demand now has two factors. One, the product prices are dropping, and second, your own demand and your ability to buy is going up. That kind of pushes up the earning growth for a lot of companies. Second big thing which plays out is as the cost of debt drops, even cost of equity begins to come down. And a combined effect of these two factors is that share prices start running up. And that's what you find, that valuations begin to inch up as the interest rates drop.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So it comes quite intuitively to me that when rates are falling, risk-free rates are falling, so cost of debt should fall. But why should cost of equity fall thereof?
That's a very interesting one. So what happens in the world of equities is that there's a term called as equity risk premium, which basically connotates how much risk is there when you would want to enter into equities. So what is the kind of premium that you would want to have if you were to move away from debt to equity as an investment. So because equities are risky as an investment and you could lose a lot of capital, there is a premium that you've got to pay for that. And the technical term for that is equity risk premium. And for the students of finance, there is a capital asset pricing model where one of the variables is equity risk premium. So as the cost of debt begins to come down, the equity risk premium also tends to come down, which is a very interesting phenomenon. And Ashwath Damodaran, who is a professor at New York University, Stern University, has done great amount of study over last many years, and he's one of the greatest thinkers in terms of equity valuation. And he, in one of his studies, commented that when the risk-free rates are in the range of about 4 to 6%, the equity risk premiums tend to be also in the range of about 4%. As we are moving to zero interest rate regime, statistical evidence shows that equity risk premium themselves are coming down just to about 2%. So as the equity risk premium comes down, the cost of investing in equity or the risk attached to that investment also begins to come down, which is another factor why valuations of stock get pushed up. And that's one reason why you find so many IPOs coming out in the market, and a lot of promoters are coming in the market and raising fresh capital through the equity route.
All right, Vinay. So that is a very insightful learning here, that when interest rates are falling, not only the cost of debt falls, but also the cost of equity falls. And this is why we see so many companies raising fresh capital through equity in the current environment. Now, apart from equity risk premium, which is largely market driven, is there a way that interest rate affect real businesses otherwise?
So in the real world, businesses need capital to run, and they generate certain profits, which we measure in terms of what is the return on the capital that the business has generated. Now, if a business generates a return of about 10% as a return on capital, and the cost of capital that is required to run the business is just, let's say, 4 or 5%, then that business is viable. You are generating a superior return while consuming cheaper capital. The business is going to be hale and hearty and do very well. But suppose if this mechanics was to reverse, that means the cost of capital goes up to, let's say, 12-13%. Now the same return on capital has become negative because you are consuming capital at 12% while generating a return of just 10%. Technically, we call this as EVA negative business. So over a period of time, the promoters of these kind of businesses will go bankrupt if the situation does not change. Now, in a real economic scenario, when the interest rate and cost of capital is high and the businesses are suffering, governments and central bank tend to bring down the bank rates so as to push down the cost of capital, so that lot of businesses which are generating lower return on capital tend to become viable. and the overall economic activity tends to pick up. And this is what is exactly happening in the world today, where almost 1/4 of the globe is at less than 1% interest rates.
All right, Vinay, so I understand that, when growth is falling, there's a push by central banks and governments to bring down the interest rates. What it does in return is ensure viability of the businesses, and also the whole trickle-down economics plays out to reduce the prices for the consumers, which is expected to revive demand in a certain way. At least that is the underlying hypothesis for rate cuts. Now, if rates are only cut when growth is already falling, then shouldn't growth and cut in the cost of capital negate each other? And if that is how it plays out, shouldn't we be looking at an ideal sweet spot in times of middling economy and low inflation, which also keeps the interest rate lows as the holy grail for highest equity valuations?
You're perfectly spot on, Ankita. So what happens in an economic setup in the real world is that at extremes, whether the economy is very slow and consequently the interest rates have to be kept low by the central banks to revive the economic activity, the PE multiple is going to be low because there is no growth that is happening, and because corporates are not growing their earnings, they obviously don't command good PE price to earning multiples, and stock prices remain cheap. On the other extreme, when the economy is overheated and inflation is very high, though the corporate profits are growing at a good speed, the problem happens that the real growth is much less because there is a accompanying high inflation scenario which is playing out. So at the extreme, whether it is very low interest rates or very high interest rates, you find that market doesn't give very high price to earning multiple, so to speak, to the stocks. So a middling economy with reasonably good growth rates is what is a perfect scenario for commanding highest valuation. In fact, if you were to draw a chart between interest rates and price to earning multiple, you find it's a inverted U-shaped chart, where at both the extreme the P is less, and in the middle the P's tend to be generally on the higher side.
All right, Vinay, so as you said that valuations form a U-shaped or a rather inverted U-shaped chart with interest rates. So a middling economy with low interest rates is the ideal sweet spot you'd look at equity valuations. Now growth is it's both a cause and it's also an effect of value creation. So how do you perceive value from the growth perspective? Are you of the camp that the distinction between the two is rather muddled, or do you think there are very clear dynamics that you can elaborate on when revisiting value but from a growth perspective?
So Ankita, if you were to ask me as one pillar which is more important than the others amongst the three pillars that we spoke of, growth is that pillar. Eventually market tends to value growth very, very significantly. Let me give you an example. Let's take the case of Hindustan Unilever over a last 20-year period. So from, let's say, 2002, 2003 to 2011, the stock was trading in the range of about 250 odd rupees. For a very long period of time, almost 8-9 years. And when you went into the numbers, actually during this period, profit of Hindustan Lever doubled from about 1200 odd crores to about 2300 odd crores. So despite doubling of profit, the shares traded just in the range of about 250 rupees for almost 8-9 years. So what was happening was that while Hindustan Lever was compounding its profits at a rate of, let's say, about 6.5%, its peer set in Nifty were compounding their profits at the rate of 15 to 16%. So Hindustan Lever was clearly a laggard in terms of growth with respect to its peer set, and it got duly punished for that. But come 2011 and over next 9 years till 2020, Hindustan Lever trebled its profits from about 2300 crores to about 6700 crore as of last year. This 3 times growth in profit had not only an impact on Hindustan Lever because of its own growth rate, but its peer set, which was the rest of the Nifty earnings, started growing just at about 5 or 6% during this period. So Hindustan Lever had a big edge on the growth side during this 8 or 9 years period. You found that for this trebling of profit, the market cap of Hindustan Lever went up by 8 times. That means the returns generated for investors were huge just because it was able to overshadow its peer set in terms of the growth numbers. So that how profound is the impact of growth as far as change in the share prices is concerned.
Okay. So when I take your point that if you were to give the highest weight to one of the pillars, it would be growth. But is earnings growth a short way for wealth creation?
So you see what happens is if the return on capital, as I mentioned earlier also, is less than the cost of capital, that means you're basically losing value for the company. The more you grow, the more you lose value. But if your return on capital is higher than the cost of capital, the more you grow, the more value gets created. Let me give you an example. Let's take a look at two of the commodity sectors, which is steel and cement. Both are fairly cyclical. That means what happens in a steel or a cement cycle is that during bad times, there is massive amount of excess capacity. Prices are very low. Most of the producers can't even make enough profits to survive. So at that particular point in time, the return on capital of these businesses drop to as low as 3-4%. Then this leads to the other extreme where capacity is shut down and eventually the demand begins to come back. Again, there is a demand supply mismatch where demand is much higher and a lot of businesses have shut down because they were not able to survive the downturn. And now the profit generation is significantly superior. That superior profit generation leads to much higher return on capital. So if I were to just give you end to end, at the bottom of the cycle, these businesses make return on capital of just 3-4%. And at the top of the cycle, these businesses could make return on capital of close to 30, 35, 40% also. So the valuations also changed that dramatically. At the bottom of the cycle, these stocks trade at 3 to 4 times EV to EBITDA valuation. While at the peak, the same number could go up to 25, 30 times also. So that's what happens when the return on capital, which is below cost of capital, versus return on capital, which is significantly above cost of capital, plays out in the real world.
So what I understand is that returns on capital should be higher than cost of capital for growth to play its stimulating part when it comes to valuation. Now sticking to ROCE, how high should ROCE be? Is it more the merrier?
So return on capital above a certain threshold is a critical requirement, as I mentioned. Now, as the ROC tends to go up, let's say it crosses 15% to 20 and 20 to 25 and then 30, you find that price to earning multiple of the company keeps on going up. But beyond a certain stage, let's say beyond 35 to 40%, even if the ROC was to jump up by another 10 or 20 percentage point, the PE multiples do not necessarily expand in that sense.
So they flatten out.
So they kind of flatten out beyond a certain threshold.
All right, Vinay, this has been a very insightful discussion thus far, and I think we have 3 key takeaways here. One, that equity valuations rise in a falling interest rate regime. This happens because the cost of capital comes down, and not just the cost of debt, but also the cost of equity falls down. And finally, growth is very important. So one needs to find that ideal sweet spot between low cost of capital and a decent enough growth. Now let us look at the Indian markets where interest rates have rather been sticky and there is more steam left in the rate cut cycle. So given that rate cuts are here to stay in the Indian context, how can one create wealth in the Indian markets by finding that ideal sweet spot?
First of all, yes, I think as far as the Indian context is concerned, our longer end of the curve has really not corrected as much as what it should have, and our sense is that yes, about 50 to 75 bips downward correction on the 10-year yield side should happen, and that would have an impact on the equity valuations and the market in a positive sense. But if you were to actually see what is the sweet spot for making a lot of money in the market, the best one and of course the most difficult one is to look at the turnaround stories. Whether turnaround in terms of sectors or in terms of stocks. Let me give you an example. Take a look at what's happening on the specialty chemical side in India in last few years. So we did a study from about early 2000s for 4 companies, and these were some of the better known names on the specialty chemical side, which was Atul Limited, Aarti Industries, Vinati Organics and PI Industries. Now these companies had above average for a chemical sector, above average numbers, both in terms of return on capital, which was almost 15-16%, and growth. So their EBIT was growing at close to about 15 odd percent. So from 2007 to about 2013, these companies grew their profit in a manner which was close to what a lot of companies in India were growing with about mid-teens and thereabout. Now, in around 2013-14 period, there were a lot of concerns which began to come in on China's chemical industry. There was huge amount of pollution concerns. A lot of companies globally were getting very worried about putting all their eggs in one basket. So China plus one theory began to happen, and India was the only country in the world which could create those kind of capacities. So a lot of business began to shift out of China towards India, and what we called as value migration began to happen. So from 2013 to 2020, same set of companies had growth which jumped up to about 20 to 23%, and return on capital which again went up to almost about 23 odd percent. Now during this period, from 2013 to 2020, the market value of these companies went up by 18 times. So that was the wealth creation which specialty chemical sector gave us for the investors who could time it right. And that's what happens when both return on capital and growth come together. And the valuations shot up from just 7 times 1 year forward to as high as 24, 25 times, which is what these companies are trading at today.
Okay. So Vinay, that's very interesting point that you've made. So what I understand is that you need to find that right sector which can have a higher growth than the system's growth. So even when the nominal GDP is trending down because of which interest rates are coming down, you need to find that sector which will outperform the nominal GDP growth, possibly in this case because it's getting a larger market share. And in this way, it will have a combination of both growth and a lower cost of capital play it out for itself. Now, Vinay, before we end this, you've been looking at Indian equity markets for more than a decade now, and you have a track record of picking stocks fairly early in the cycle. So, based on your experience and your expertise, what is that one factor that you look at while valuing equity stocks?
So that's a very interesting one, Ankita. I wish there could be just one factor which could drive your entire understanding of equity market, but that's a very difficult one given the complexities of the equity market. In fact, one of the market wizards, Howard Marks, a while ago wrote a book called as The Most Important Thing, in which there were about 20 odd chapters, each of which he considered as the most important thing. These were basically a collection of his memos which he had written over the last 20-25 years. So whether the market cycles are most important, whether understanding of risk or controlling the risk is the most important thing, whether understanding valuations is most important, there is no one particular thing which is which can make you understand the whole gamut of equity valuations and make you rich so quickly. The subject is fairly complex and fairly vast, and one of the things which is most important is, of course, to continue to be a learning machine and keep on reading as much as you can. Sure. And probably that could widen your horizon enough to make some money in the markets.
All right, Vinay. So, like all things in life, there is investing also seems to be all about finding that right balance, and learning helps. We need to continuously evolve our investment philosophies and capture the right trends very early on for the wealth creation to happen. As we move in the decade coming ahead of us, there could be multiple factors that could play out, which could be shift in assets from tangible to intangible. There could be more competition because of lower cost of capital that could take a toll on profitability. So we shall wait and see how the world unfolds after this cycle. But on a final note, we've established that interest rates have a very profound impact and they push the equity valuations on the upside. So thank you, Vinay, for joining us on this show. It was very insightful discussion, and our learnings on the upside on equity valuations, but also how the whole valuation model plays has been very insightful thus far. Thank you so much.
Thank you.